because they were bankrupt again, and will default by April 1st. So we went from stimulus package. So we want to restrain spending, but yet one of the first things they do out of the chute is put $800 billion onto the national deficit. Then we go to their budget. By the way, remember, Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid didn't want to pass the appropriation bills the year before because it was an election year. So they decided to pass them in March. The discretionary spending went up 11% in the fiscal 10 spending. Then we get to the budget, and what we find out is their budget assumes that they're going to raise about $2 trillion in new taxes. It's advertised as just soaking the rich, but if you look at it, it affected every tax bracket. It affects anyone who has a 401k or an IRA. It really affects everyone in America. But yet, it's sold as only the rich, which I don't agree with that philosophy either. But that was the budget. It also assumed within that budget that they had a $1.6 trillion deficit. That's on top of the $800 billion that they did off budget just before. Then we go into cap and trade. In cap and trade, that was, like I said, my committee had primary jurisdiction over that bill. I know it fairly intimately. As people were telling me, it's the economy. What are you doing about the economy? You missed the boat on a stimulus. It's not creating jobs, except in Washington, D.C. You want to find a stimulus job, drive down to Independence Avenue where they're expanding some of the government buildings now. Don't look for any here. Now, cap and trade. I'm not going to discuss the nuances of the bill, but what it does is says the United States government, any one entity that emits CO2, carbon dioxide, or any greenhouse gas, has to pay the government to continue to do it. It's called an allowance. Then they set an arbitrary number called a cap that you are allowed to emit. Now remember, you get to buy your allowances up to the cap level. If you then exceed that cap level in cap and trade, you have to then go on to a trading floor created by Goldman Sachs and buy a credit from somebody that was able to stay under the cap and earn a credit. So that's the cap and that's the trade part. The government assumed in the budget from last year that it would raise about, in its first year, about $600 billion. By the way, do you know what the number was for the health care costs as the down payment? $600 billion.
They were going to get that.
Yeah.
Did they know even where they start?
Where they start.
Yes.
Yeah, on the cap part?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 80%. I know this is going to throw numbers.
80% of what?
80% of your 2005 level. So when you, that's a good question, but everyone who admits that will have to somehow have calculated what their
Who's going to
emissions.
calculate?
The EPA.
That's what they do.
Yes. So cap and trade comes along, and we find out that what's the end product of an extremely expensive bill, one that's going to drive millions of jobs offshore, will cost American jobs, will cost everyone who turns on a light switch more money. OPPD said 25% increase in your bill the first day it goes into effect. Then over a 15-year period, it will double. And that's just the cap and trade part. And so the people started to say, well, that's a tax on me. By the way, if I'm going to be paying a big new tax on global warming, how much does it improve our environment? Well, it doesn't. But we have to show leadership so the rest of the world will. China's on the ground laughing at us at this point in time. Because they're saying, all of your manufacturing, come on over here. We've got a place for you right here. America doesn't want you, we do. And it's a sad commentary when it seems to me that China is more open to business, more laissez-faire under communism than we are under Obama. Now, then our committee goes straight into health care after we pass cap and trade. And I just mentioned that even though we went through 50 hours of work, divided up between a couple of different weeks, once we were done with our product, Nancy Pelosi threw it away. But when you look at cap and trade, it was the biggest power grab over business, industry, and manufacturing by empowering the EPA, almost carte blanche. Healthcare empowers the Health and Human Services over your health care, carte blanche. Be assured that there's nothing in that health care bill that empowers you in any way. It takes any of your ability to make decisions with your physician away from you and moves it to Washington, D.C. Now, since I've been in Washington for a few years now, and I have to work with these bureaucrats on a daily basis, I will tell you, I don't trust them to organize a 2-car parade for me. They won't even show up to do it. But yet we want to trust them to handle our health care decisions, not your doctor and not you. As one businessman expressed it, it's rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. You aren't doing anything to make the boat safer so it won't sink. You're just wrestling over who's going to control it. And it was an excellent point. The bill doesn't reduce costs in health care, whether it's through tort reform or just basic reforms in there that I think are necessary because it's very wasteful in the system. None of those were. It was all about who's going to control it. And no matter what they say, the control of your health care was going to be placed in the hands of the Health and Human Services Director. And a person that she and the President would appoint that would be called the Commissioner. Not a czar, still starts with a C. But yeah, it's very czar-esque. But that person would have to would have the power to mandate what would be in every privately sold policy and what would be in the public option. And by the way, if you look at the public option, it had every advantage. Because they got to dictate the costs, they got to mandate that this would be more costly on the private sector. So there was no doubt in my mind that this was a short path to a single-payer nationalized healthcare system. So if any of us that embrace free enterprise principles, this was totally contrary. Now, where are we today on healthcare? I have no clue. Well, that's the direction we're moving, but what's with the bill? There's a summit, the President has asked for a summit. It's hard to turn that down. Here's the interesting part about going to the White House.
He won't listen.
And frankly, that's what we want out of it. Or not that we don't want. I mean, if he'd come out and say, okay, we're going to scrap this and we're going to work with you now, I doubt that'll happen. I really doubt that will happen. In fact, talking to Leader Boehner a few days ago, I asked him about the summit, and first of all, we don't have a date or a time yet. But he said that he is hearing, we're not told of anything, by the way,